So the director for that Power Rangers short is Joseph Kahn. Prior to doing this, he actually did Torque back in 2004. It was not met with a lot of success. It barely broke even. But I think what happened after Torque is a lot of music artists liked what they saw and they wanted him to direct a lot of their music videos. And he has actually basically turned that experience, as well as I think this short, into the opportunity to build a very successful music video career for himself. Hello, and welcome to the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Chasen, and like always, I'll be joined today by the team that brings you cupofteacritiques.com. Here, we'll dive deep into the productions and topics we broach on our website, so you can decide for yourself if they're your cup of tea. Ready for a deep look with a deep brew? This week's topic, short films of famous directors. Cup of Tea Critiques is a family affair, and I'm here with my brother Chris, my mother Reba, and my father Terry.
I came across one by Robert Rodriguez called Bedhead. It was like 8 or 9 minutes long. It was actually pretty good. But it was kind of the same thing. It was a voiceover narration and in black and white like the other ones. So I thought that was interesting.
The one I found most interesting was a short film done in 1963 by a Senegalese director, and his name was Ousmane Sembini, I think it's pronounced. I'm not sure that's the correct pronunciation, but it's Ousmane Sembini. So it's Ousmane is the first name, and Sembene. So he did a film in 1963 called Barom Sarat. He's a Senegalese filmmaker. And I thought his short film was quite interesting. So first, a little background on this. What I learned before watching the film is that it was actually restored by an organization that was started by Martin Scorsese for the purposes of restoring art that would be potentially lost, cinematic art that could potentially be lost. And this was one film that is at risk of being lost. And the reason this film was so important is because Ousmane Sembini is known to be the first Black African film director. And so this was his short film. And so that's why this work was so significant. And so Scorsese's organization restored this film. I thought it was a very, very interesting film. It's a little over 20 minutes. And it is about a man who lives in a rural area of Senegal. And I won't say he drives, he rides a taxi for a living. And what I mean by that is he has a horse and a carriage, and that is the taxi. And what he does, he goes around his rural town, he picks people up and takes them, into, essentially the downtown rural area to go shopping, or, in one case, he took a woman, a pregnant woman who was about to give birth, to the hospital for her husband. And so that is what he does for a living. But then there's one person who does come up to him who's dressed in a suit. And that is very unusual for this rural community. So this man comes up to him in a suit and asks him to take him into the city. And of course, once they agreed, they haggle over price, but ultimately, he agrees to do it.
Assalamu alaikum, es-tu en paix? Paix seulement. Je déménage, je vais au plateau. Au plateau? Oui. Oh, c'est interdit au Borom Saret. J'ai des relations et je paye bien. Les relations, non. Mais je vais jamais. Regarde, c'est défendu. Ah.
And he takes them into the city, and what you see are aerial views of the city as they enter the city. And so it goes from being these kind of this very poor rural area to now transforming into these high-rise buildings and these, apartments that have balconies, buildings that have security and paved streets and automobiles. They don't have automobiles in his particular area of town. And so it was the transition that was really remarkable. When I saw that, and I was like, wow, it was really something. And then the way he was treated, because he came into the city, he's having to He's having to stop at stoplights. So they have stoplights. It's something he doesn't have to worry about in his area. But now here he is with this horse and carriage, and he's stopping at stoplights alongside automobiles. Anyway, eventually a police officer pulls him over and checks him out, checks his papers. And long story short is he takes his carriage from him, and he winds up having to walk his horse all the way back to the village. Stopping at stoplights along the way because you can't have a horse on a sidewalk. So it was very, very, it was quite compelling, actually, the contrast between the two locations. So, sorry, that was a mouthful.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I came away when I was listening to the YouTube video, one of the things that caught my attention was the thought of these. I think it was also mentioned in one of the articles. They gave the idea of a feature film length as being a series of shorts. And I didn't think about that because when we started this topic, it was about, famous directors and the shorts that they've made. That particular thing, it was in the first article for sure. It caught my attention because I was reminded of the Star Wars animation. They had an animated movie that was connecting episode 2 to episode 3. It was done the video release was done in 2 parts. I got to wondering if any of these directors actually did the same thing to build their initial, particularly their initial bigger releases, as well as in general, have they viewed their movie making experience as being a series of short films? For each of those scenes, they're viewing it as more of a short film that they eventually put together as this feature-length film.
I'm sure that's the case for some of them. I tend to think they had that the short film is a reflection of a feature film that they'd already written. But maybe they went the opposite way. Maybe like you said, they had, short films they kind of strung together, or these different short film ideas that they strung together when they had the funding.
I wonder, Chris, because you said that you think it started off as a feature length, but I'm trying to find the quote in this first one here. The guy specifically calls here it is. It's in the first paragraph when they were having a conversation of why shorts versus feature length or whatever. In this whole opening segment, they're talking about how there's a difference between the funding to do the big picture, as well as sometimes the story is just told in that short film, which is why I thought, is it possible that they are, when they make even their feature lengths now, do they view it as, I need to tell the story in this scene. I need to tell the story in this scene. And then those short films, those scenes are short films, and then they put it together as a feature length. Mom, you were about to say something a moment ago, too.
There were a couple of things they said that I found really interesting that's similar to your point. And that is, for some of these directors, they took their first films, which were not intended to be feature films at all. But what they wound up doing is, as they made feature films later on, as they became established directors, they stole pieces of those short films. Like they talk about one of Quentin Tarantino's films, they actually took a character from one of his short films, because I think he did a couple of them. My Best Friend's Birthday.
Clarence Poole Show. Now, sorry, I don't play requests. Because when I'm Jock, I play what I want to play when I want to play. Oh, someday maybe you can be a jock and you can play what you want to play. Oh, if your taste is respected as mine, you will. Well, I don't give a shit what Unruly Julie plays in her show. I don't care. Well, then listen to Unruly Julie then, dickbait. Well, fuck your mama.
There's a line of dialogue in that short film. He did that very, very early, obviously before he was an established director. But here comes along True Romance. Christian Slater delivers that exact same line in True Romance.
He wrote True Romance.
It does show you how they borrow from themselves for later features.
They also allude to how they use the short films for their storytelling process later on. It was Spielberg that they cited when, I can't remember the name of the short film, but they talked about how he used the angles to help with the storytelling, with this scene where a truck is being pushed, I think, into a train, and you can see the wheels trying to go in reverse. And he used that same storytelling element when he did Lost World. So it's, to your point, they're borrowing from what they did in the past with their dialogue. Now they're also borrowing from how they did, or at least they're using it to build storytelling in their feature-length productions.
In the case of what you're talking about, I think those are signatures that they're giving away in their short films. Mm. What I'm talking about, though, is how they borrow from things they did specifically in short films. So another example, other than the one that I just mentioned, Christopher Nolan's film, the short film Following is what it's called. There's a character in there called Cobb. And he used that exact same character in Inception. And so years later, after he became an established filmmaker, he went back to when he was in film school, grabbed that short film and took that character and put it in Inception. And frankly, I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't.
Not in the least.
I mean, it truly speaks to, in my view, it truly speaks to what their art is all about.
Yeah. Following, by the way, is like, it's like 70, 75 minutes, somewhere in there.
Is that long? That's not a short. That's not a short.
Yeah. It's a short feature.
It used to be on Netflix. I watched it when I first moved out here, basically, when Netflix had everything.
Following cost him $6,000 to make. And that's something that I am blown away by too, is how much they were able to do with so little. Stanley Kubrick made 2 films, Flying Padre, about a priest that flies airplanes, and Day of the Fight. Both of these were docu-style short films. And the Day of the Fight basically showed a boxer the day before a fight, working out, getting crap put on his face, that kind of thing. Each of these films was $3,900 to make.
Wow.
But you think about this, though, and they were black and white.
What year?
I don't remember the years, but they were, I don't remember the years, but Kubrick's up there. Yeah, so I imagine it had to be in the 60s or 70s is my thinking. But $3,900 each. But you think about this, though. What student has $3,900 to make a film?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're lucky if they can.
How they borrow, I'm sure.
Well, no. My point is that Stanley Kubrick obviously had access to that. You know, he was fortunate enough to have access to that. How many student filmmakers have $3,900 to make their movies? As a matter of fact, there's another one that they have a $1,000 budget.
Wow.
Okay. But yes, this director went on to do things. Ari Aster.
Ari Aster, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that name.
Hereditary, Midsummer, Hereditary, Beau is Afraid. Like, he's like kind of one of the A24 horror guys.
Yeah,
he mostly does horror movies.
He did a short film called Munchausen.
Yeah.
Cost him $1,000. And so, I don't know, when I was in college, the idea of having $1,000 was just, that was what? So to think about people able to do films for $3,900, it's like, okay, you obviously had access to some change.
Yeah, well, I mean, so, I think some of them did get kind of grants from, like, film schools, but even those are maybe for they won a prize for a contest from a previous project or something like that. But so I think some of it is grant money. So I'm sure some of it is just friends or family chipping in, and also just begging. Just go around and say, hey, I'll use this if you. If you give me a little money, I'll make sure you're in the credits, or I'll whatever it is,
Yeah. James Cameron's Xenogenesis, that short film about robots and such, cost him $20,000. And that $20,000 was given to him by a dentist. A dentist gave him that money to shoot that film. And I thought that was very interesting. Probably a dentist / friend, or a friend of the family, whatever, but still. So I just find it incredible what they were able to do with, first of all, to get the money, and secondly, to be able to do what they did with that film and some of the tricks, which I think Chris can probably speak to better than any others.
So I think the lesson from that to aspiring filmmakers, be a dentist.
Or know a dentist. Huh?
Fix a few teeth and then you can make your own film for free.
Be friendly with your dentist.
Yeah.
What also impressed me about this work is how they were able to do it on such a small budget. So one of the techniques that were quite common, it seems, or at least a pattern I've observed in these short films, is narration was used an awful lot. So as opposed to there being a lot of dialogue, there was a great deal of narration. So that way you just need, one person, one voice, essentially. And then let the action ensue and just have that narration over the top. Another was the choice to use black and white versus color, which is also a cheaper route as well. One film I watched, for example, Luc Goddard did a film called A Flirtatious Woman. It was done in black and white and done with narration as well. It was done in 1955 too, which is also something that kind of blows me away. It is about a woman who's walking down the street and she sees this woman in an apartment window, and people pass by, she would smile, and then her smile would go away, and she'd smile again, and she couldn't understand what that was about. And she stood there long enough to realize that this woman was smiling at every guy that passed by. So it turned out she was a sex worker. Okay, and
disparaissait derrière les nuages, et j'hésitais à prendre le tram lorsque mon attention fut attirée par une femme que je voyais à sa fenêtre, presque en face de moi, de l'autre côté de la rue. Elle n'avait rien d'extraordinaire, mais elle m'intrigua car un sourire, très léger, très rapide, animait régulièrement ses traits. Et je me demandais, à qui est destinée cette suite ininterrompue de sourires? Soudain, je compris. Elle souriait à tous les hommes qui passaient sous sa fenêtre. Des vieux, des laids, des jolis, des grands, des hommes de toutes les sortes. À peine avait-elle attrapé leur regard qu'elle leur faisait signe. Mais de sourire.
So she was just flabbergasted by it. And so, but she was curious as well. So she wanted to see if that would work for her. Now she's a married woman. And her husband has gone away, is not home. He's gone away on business. But anyway, she's curious. I wonder if that would work for me. And so the narration is about, basically going through her mind. How does she do it? Can she get up the nerve to do it? She's real nervous about doing it. Who will I do it to? That kind of thing. And ultimately she goes to, walks through a park, and there's this man sitting there reading a newspaper, and she's crossing back and forth in front of him. And obviously he notices her because she's walking back and forth. And then finally she sits down at the end of the bench. She eventually turns and smiles and then turns back. So she's real shy, embarrassed. And then when he finally approaches her, she runs and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I should never." She runs away. But this guy is so interested in her that he jumps in his car and chases her all the way home, all the way to her front door. And he tries to give her, I think he tries to give her money or something, and tries to, convince her to obviously, sleep with him. But ultimately she got rid of him without him coming into their apartment. But I thought it was funny because the narration is, people are funny inside their heads. Can you imagine what it's like to hear what people are going through in their heads? And that's what we're getting from this. It was a very entertaining short film. That was
that's interesting. I think, that to our point, the black and white, at the time, I think filmmakers now, maybe, if you can shoot stuff on your phone, even if it's not the preferred method, you have an easier way to do, to do color than some of the filmmakers of the short films that we watched. And I think if we were to take it that they were, shooting on film or something, that's a pretty significant difference in price, between the black and white and color. So it definitely makes sense. And I think the voiceover narration just helped them save time and gave them a bigger margin for error, which I mean is saving you money, but they didn't have to worry about background noise from wherever they were shooting, or having to get it. I'm sure it simplified the editing process, and it simplified shooting, and they didn't have a bunch of wasted takes, that cost them time and daylight, and then they had now you have to, and especially if you're shooting on film, and it's like, well, that's even more significant. The lighting you have to work with is even more significant. So I think some of the things that we saw filmmakers consistently doing in their low budget, micro budget short films is giving themselves more margin for error and more time, which in a sense saved them more money. So they were money moves, but I think those are the motivations there. One of the ones I watched was Greta Gerwig, who directed Barbie, and a lot of she's done a lot of indie films. She had a short film that was like not even 5 minutes long called "Thanks for the Ad." She's just sitting, she's kind of like sitting on a stoop, and she asks a guy that's walking by for his phone so she can make a phone call real quick. I think we all, when maybe that used to happen more often, but like when somebody did that, usually it was somebody you knew, but even if it was a stranger, they were just calling really quick and then they give you your phone back, right? Like they just had to deliver some message and give you your phone back. She calls her boyfriend and she starts, she's talking to her boyfriend, and then it becomes, kind of, it's like, you hang up first. No, you hang up first. So she's having this kind of like, and he tells her some new, you only hear her side of it, but he tells her some kind of big news, involving their friends or something like that. And so this guy's just sitting there next to her, with his book, waiting for his phone back, and so the way it's funny the way she shoots it, kind of starts on her, but then she's kind of cutting to him, and he's just kind of like, trying not to look annoyed.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. It's like he's been gone, and then he.
Is that your mom?
No, it's my boyfriend. Yeah.
I'm sorry I hesitated with the.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It really is so nice of you.
Oh, sure. Well, my name's Kent.
Oh, hi, I'm Greta.
Greta. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah. All right. Well, good luck with your boyfriend.
Oh, yeah.
Are you on MySpace by any chance, or?
And I think it is kind of if you watch some of her indie films, that there are scenes similar to that, just kind of awkward scenes, or scenes where somebody has to wait on somebody, or scenes where somebody there's tension, there's things not being said, and so I found that to be a funny short, so I was glad I found that one.
Interesting to me was how far back some of these things go. One of the articles, or a couple of the articles actually, mentioned Scorsese project and George Lucas. The Scorsese one was The Big Shave, which was kind of a venture in horror. I think it was a student film of his, 1967. I was like, oh boy, that's going way back. And the same with Lucas. I found it interesting that they were in the same year. Now on Electronic Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting to me is I didn't even think, the first time I had heard of short films was when Chris came home from film school and began talking about shorts and short films. And that was my first exposure to that, and so to hear that these were being done, in 1955, when, Usman Sambani did his film, and to your point, in the 60s, when George Lucas did his film, and so on and so forth. I mean, Luc Goddard did A Flirtatious Woman in 1955. I did not know short films were being done for that long, but it makes so much sense to do. So Chris wrote an article on short films, as a matter of fact, which I think fits very well with, with this topic. Today, I started reading your article again today. And you bring up in the article, short films are still being used today, even by very young, people new to the industry. So they recognize the value of short films and showcasing their particular style. And I think it's probably important as well to distinguish between a short film and a proof of concept, because short films tell a complete story. They typically tell a complete story. Flirtatious Woman, Burton, Surratt, all these films tell a complete story. But hang on a second. Zack Snyder's short film Die Free was just a minute and a half of fighting in order to show potential investors or studio heads what the film would look like visually. That was the whole point of that minute and a half, to show that stylized violence. And that was enough for them to give him a significant budget to take that and produce 300, which we know turned out to be a huge success. As Chris points out in his article. It didn't show a story at all. And it had nothing to do with the story. That was the proof of concept, not a short film.
By the way, you can find that article on our website at cupofteacritiques.com in the Crumpet section.
I think it's important to distinguish between a short film and a proof of concept.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if I had to, I mean, the point about the complete story is a good one. I feel like generally, if I had to guess, a lot of directors who are making a proof of concept already probably have investor interest. They probably already know that they probably already have people interested in investing in whatever their project is, and I'm mostly guessing here, but as a requirement to getting the funding, they have to provide this in order for the investor to know, what the heck their money is going towards. I think I'm pretty sure that was the case with Zack Snyder's film. And I think it was the case with Robert Rodriguez's The Customer Is Always Right. In fact, that scene is in the film. The entire thing is in the film. So it's probably dependent on the situation, but I think that is what a lot of it is that I'm providing this so so that you have an idea of what I'm putting your money towards. But yeah, I think with the short films, I think that a lot of these directors did go to film school. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I think not only are the kids' resources limited, the school, you're in a school setting, so you don't have a feature film could take a long time to put together. So if you're doing it for a class or even if it's a 2-semester class, you have a limited amount of time to make whatever the project is. So I think it definitely makes sense. And when you look at it through the eyes of a lot of these directors, that a lot of these short films that we're looking at are from directors who were indeed in film school, or even if they were just fresh out of film school.
So Titanic wasn't a student project?
No, but Lord
Depends
of the
who you
Rings,
ask,
all
I
3
guess.
films was one story and done throughout the course of 4 years.
Yeah, Peter Jackson actually, from my understanding, didn't have any formal film training, but he does have a short film called The Valley. That I can't remember exactly what year it came out, but if you read the synopsis, it does. I mean, obviously he didn't come up with the Lord of the Rings, but it sounds similar to the Lord of the Rings, so it makes sense to kind of pair a director with that style and with that project.
Came out in 1976.
Yeah,
Well, that's quite a bit before the Lord of the Rings.
Right. It's like, wow.
Just a little bit. What I found interesting, though, is that the primary objective of short films, to your point, Chris, they have, if it is a student project, they only have so much time to get it done, and they only have so much budget to do it in. So you want to make something that is going to essentially speak to what you're about as an artist. What I think is that that's what makes short films so important to a director's career. And one example of that I think about that really sticks out is Tim Burton's Vincent. And it is about a kid who, I think he's 7 years old, like a 7-year-old kid who always fantasized about ghoulish stuff. So he stayed in his bedroom where he kept it dark, and he thought about dark things. When his aunt would visit, he imagined taking her and dunking her into a hot vat of wax. He would imagine his dog as a zombie. So he had that kind of imagination. But
Vincent is nice when his aunt comes to see him, but imagines dipping her in wax for his wax museum.
that was Tim Burton's short.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim Burton's films are just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these shorts, Quentin Tarantino's are the exact same way. You look at his shorts and they tell you so much about the style, the artistry, the ideas, the headspace of these directors. And so if a studio or investor or whatever wants a part in their project or is thinking about bringing them in, they already know the essence of them. They already know what they're going to get. And I think that's absolutely key, because people want to know when they're going to invest in it, you know, well, what are you going to give me? What are you about? Now they already know that short film allows for that.
And the video we watched kind of alluded to the idea of, you know, we think about actors getting typecast, that it kind of happens to directors too. They end up, the opportunities they get are kind of in the same vein. So it kind of adds up that when we kind of retrace the steps and see what these directors' first projects were, that they are kind of indicative of what they're known for. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I mean, when I watched Bedhead by Robert Rodriguez, it was you know, it was for kids. It was tame, but it was kind of in the vein of some of his action. You know, it was even the style a little bit was kind of like some of his action movies.
At this point, I realized I had the power to do anything I wanted. I could bring peace to the Middle East or become the first Mexican-American female president of the United States. But first things first. And the first thing I'm gonna do is get rid of that bill.
I thought Greta Gerwig's short film "Thanks for the Ad" was very similar to some of her indie work. Catherine Bigelow did a short, I can't actually find it anywhere, called "The Setup" when she was in school, in film school. That was basically about I think it had voiceover, but it was just it's two men beating each other up basically in an alley, and it was like set to narration or something like that, and it's just kind of meant to kind of illustrate the pointlessness of violence, which I think is a pretty consistent theme in her work. Guillermo del Toro had I haven't seen it, but I thought this was a hilarious synopsis for a movie. He has a short film called Geometria, and the synopsis on IMDb reads: "A boy is tired of failing geometry, so he summons a demon." Which, if you told me Guillermo del Toro directed that, I'd be like, yeah, that kind of adds up.
Yeah.
You know, and I think what's interesting also is, and not to expand or get off track, but even some filmmakers who don't necessarily have a signature short film, you know, they do other projects. I think Spike Jonze, you know, I guess he's mostly known for music videos, but he's directed a bunch of music videos. So I'm sure that's kind of contributed to his style for his feature films too. And Spike Lee obviously did his fair share of music videos and kind of other works. And so I think that helps, you know, hone his style a little bit too. And I think, you know, I'm sorry, real quick, just to say, I think a lot of why directors end up doing kind of this, you know, work in a similar vein or with a similar style is because for most of their career, they're probably needing funding or support from studios and from investors. I think if you're wealthy enough to make to fund your own stuff, you can probably experiment however much you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Real good point.
Chris, I'm glad you brought up music videos because I found myself looking back as well as we were covering this topic, because one of my favorite short films was actually the Power Rangers short film that was done back in 2015. And I got to wondering, in general, I went down this path of wondering how many short films have we seen of recent directors that have actually turned into something that I didn't realize. So the director for that Power Rangers short is Joseph Kahn.
When two empires declare war, neither side is innocent.
You're still a traitor, you worthless piece.
We were children, asked to fight an intergalactic war against an enemy we'd never met. Let's stop pretending our side stood on some moral high ground.
Prior to doing this, he actually did Torque back in 2004. It was not met with a lot of success. It barely broke even. But I think what happened after Torque is a lot of music artists liked what they saw, and they wanted him to direct a lot of their music videos. And he has actually basically turned that experience, as well as I think this short, into the opportunity to build a very successful music video career for himself. I mean, he's done things for artists like Maroon 5, BB Rexha, J-Lo, several music videos for Taylor Swift. So it made me just take a step back and realize that, short film success may not just be going from short film to, the feature film, but they may actually have built an entire career based off of what could be a proof of concept or just an idea of what I can do. And they said, hey, I like that guy. I want to really use him to do this kind of deal. So his entire career seems to be now short films, but the short music videos, he's won Grammy Awards as a result of his work. So very successful career based off his work.
The best short film, John Landis, Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Well, yeah. But to me, that's the same as Chris jumping up and down and saying, you can't use Michael Jordan. You can't use Thriller. The bar is so high up for that one. It's like Thriller's number one and number two is about 2 billion below. Like it doesn't compare. The Thriller short film is the best of all time for music videos.
You know what? But to your point, Brandon, regarding some directors not just sticking to the short films that they do, but branching outside of that as a way of showing that they have range in their directing. One of the pieces I read talked about how some of these directors do multiple shorts for that reason. To you and Chris's point, they can be typecast. We just talked about Tim Burton, for example, and we all of us, shook our head because he is a type. There is a type of art that he does. Quentin Tarantino, there's a type of film that he does. You pretty much, generally, what you're going to get from those artists. What I find, the point I'm trying to get to is this, is that what I find very interesting is that a number of these directors, after they have made these shorts and become successful directors, they still go back and do other shorts. That's what I find very interesting. And I wonder if they do that, one, because it may just be fun for them. Another, though, as Chris kind of alluded to earlier, is maybe they're experimenting. Maybe they're trying a different genre. Maybe they're trying a different approach.
Like comedians do when they test material and to go to some venue and
exactly. And so that's what's interesting. I thought when your short film days are over once you've made it big as a director, but it seems that that's not the case. If you want to keep, kind of pushing yourself and stretching yourself, a short film may be the way to do it.
I get the sense that I think it serves two purposes. One is trying to hone their craft. Like they're trying out new material. They're probably considering trying to do something for a feature they have in mind, and they're using this short as a way of testing the waters and working towards that next end of where they implement this into their feature film. The second reason why I think they do it is it could be that to that first article's point, that might be the whole story for them. They might have this story in their head that is very short. It's not their normal work, but they want to get the story out of their head and onto film. And that's why they go ahead and do a short film for that one purpose, whether it's in the same, if it's in the same style as what they normally do, whatever. But the point is they may just have that out there for them.
Or I mean, the same way a lot of music artists, they have tons of songs that they never release.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Chris.
Yeah, just I think, especially as in their kind of young, ambitious days, they're just coming up with ideas all the time, and they probably have. When you see them come out with a short film later, it could be something they came up with when they were 23, and they just they never made it at that time, and they're like, you know what, I've always wanted to work with this dude or this actress, and they now they have the means to actually make a polished short film, probably with someone they've always wanted to work with, and so to this point, I don't know if I'm making this whole backstory. I don't know if it's the case for this particular director, but Yorgos Lanthimos, who did Poor Things, Kinds of Kindness, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. If you go back farther, he's done some other stuff. A few years ago, he did a short film called Nimic, I believe it was Nimic, and it was starring Matt Dillon. It's in a similar vein to a lot of his other stuff, but it is, he's at this point he's done several features, when this came out, because I think it was 2019 when this came out. So either he shot this a long time ago, or he, wanted to team up with Matt Dillon on a project.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting that he, he's a real successful director, been around a while, and yet he went and did the short film. Another thing I thought was quite revealing too is how directors have to maximize every moment of the time that they're shooting, every piece, every half inch of tape that they use. Like Ari Aster's film Munchausen, okay, $1,000 budget. You have to be careful when to speak and when to let the visual speak for you. That was kind of the talk around that. And when you don't have much to work with, then you have to be sure you maximize every piece of everything that you have. And so sometimes don't make use of audio. Just let the visuals speak for you for a particular scene. Sometimes I thought this was very interesting. In Damien Chazelle's short, you use natural light to shoot during the day. So now you don't have to bring in lighting for that. And so those are just some of the kinds of things that you have to be sensitive to. In short films, every movement, every shot, facial expression, and word combined with music for precise presentation that is fundamentally inexpressible. I thought that was a really great quote in this particular article. So every single thing matters when you're doing a short, because the budget is so small, typically for them. Your cast is so tiny. Your resources are just so minimal that everything matters. And so it is very stressful shooting a short, probably more stressful than it is shooting a feature, because your budget is so limited. Your resources are so limited. You've got to be a great manager to get that done.
I think that's one of the reasons. Sorry, real quick, bro. I think that's one of the reasons why I keep going back to that Power Rangers short, because it turns out that one had a budget of about 40,000, or it's said to have been made with about 40,000, and for a short film, only about 15 minutes, it had a lot more special effects involved than I have seen in any other short film ever. And so you're right, Mom. Most of the storytelling in short films, and this is the beauty of those, is that it has to be done a lot more with the angles. It has to be done a lot more with the suspense. Less is more, essentially, in there. And this one short film actually managed to have a budget large enough to go ahead and give us the special effects to make it look, for a 15-minute short, very feature filmish.
Yeah.
I'd have to imagine that a lot of directors look back on that very fondly, though. As stressful as it might have been, I think, sometimes people say your life gets better and then you have more to complain about, kind of like, things that would be unacceptable to them on a film set now are things that they just had no choice but to deal with, things they had to operate around. I think if you ask a lot of successful directors, they would probably look back really fondly on even how stressful and limiting those projects felt. They would probably they were happier than they probably realized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they probably say it was the most fun they've had in their
Mhm.
lives. Yeah, because one thing about those, even though their resources were tight, they also had creative freedom then. Probably more creative freedom than they would ever have again.
Mm.
Because once you sign on for a feature film, now you're accountable to somebody. You're accountable to somebody, and some decisions might be taken out of your hands. You're gonna have to leave this one. You're gonna have to leave 15 minutes on the cutting room floor. We're not gonna release, a film of that length.
You have to work with this actor.
Yeah. We're only gonna give you this much cast. Whatever it is, though, now you're accountable. So you can't, your creativity cannot be as wide as it was then, as wide and free as it was then. So I imagine they would. Wouldn't it be great to be, kind of a fly on the wall in the room with, a bunch of these directors that did these short films, like 5 directors that did these short films, and hear them talk about what that experience was like? It would be fantastic to be a fly on the wall.
Well, that's another edition of the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast. Thanks so much for listening and figuring out your cup of tea along with us. Honestly, we could go on and on like we do at our dinner table, but we look forward to you joining us again next week for another great discussion. Make sure you rate and follow the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Don't forget to leave a comment and share your favorite short film with us. You can stay in the loop on all things COTC by subscribing on our website at cupofteacritiques.com. You can also find us on Facebook, check out our Instagram at Cup of Tea Critiques, and on Letterboxd at COT Critiques. For Reba, Terry, and Chris, I'm Brandon. We'll see you next week for another deep look with a deep brew.